I just want to reduce victimhood. I'm interested in reducing the number of victims.
That's the goal. Welcome to the Witness Box, everybody. I'm your host, Joshua Diaz, alongside my two co-hosts, Dr. Gary Piccato, forensic psychologist, author of The New Evil, and Chris McDonough, a homicide detective extraordinaire, if you ask me. Both serve on the Cold Case Foundation. Dr. Gary, how are you this evening?
Well, as can be expected, it's a difficult time.
Hanging in, right? Hanging in. That's what matters. And we got old faithful over here, Mr. Reliable, stay strong in the pocket. Chris McDonough, how are you, Chris?
I am doing great.
Tough as nails. You're tough as nails. You really are. I mean, it's impressive.
With you and Dr. Mercado here, are you kidding me? What better day could I have?
I always enjoy these get-togethers, and recording these podcasts are a lot of fun. And tonight we're going to talk about the Rachel Morin case. There was an arrest, and I know that you guys have been on this case for some time. And Gary, can you just kind of give me your overview of that case? I know that you have worked with the family and been in contact with them. Just kind of give us a little a brief history of how you got involved and just your overall thoughts before we start.
Well, just to be clear, Chris and I did not work with the family in any official capacity. The idea was that the family members came on Chris's show, The Interview Room, and we were able to provide them with a lot of support. We also met with Doug McGregor, who was a kind of expert that helped them with trying to create a profile of the offender and what may have gone on there. And Chris and I gave thoughts based on our experience of the kind of offender we might be dealing with. And we were able to let the family know that we were pretty confident this was probably a serial killer, and that he would be caught because it was really just a matter of time till he did something else. And indeed he was, consistent with what we had said. It was very beautiful because the family expressed a very great deal of faith. We all had in common a kind of Christian hope about this case. And one of the things that I had said to the family was that, from the Christian perspective, the day that Rachel passed was sort of more like her true birthday, right? That's the Christian idea, right? And the day of that tragedy. And we talked a little bit about how Chris talked to them about how there's no reason they couldn't ask their deceased beloved family member to help, somehow spiritually, right? And then when the press conference happened, they said that it was on Rachel's birthday that the case broke. And I wondered if Chris heard that the way I did, there you go.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting.
Right. But didn't you feel that was spiritually very powerful for the family?
Yeah, the universe was on schedule. In fact, early that morning, I got a text message from one of the family members, actually her brother, and said, "Hey, big news, it's going down." And I said, "Congratulations, outstanding. How are you feeling?" He goes, "Mixed emotions. They got him in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and they're going to bring him back, but we're not sure how that's going to go down yet." And I said, "Stay the faith, or stay the course, so that it's not confusing."
Yeah.
No, Gary, that morning he texted me and said he's in custody. We got him. And that's when I texted you and said they got him.
Yeah.
And in fact, I don't know if I still have the text. Look.
That's wonderful. I have to say that it was a kind of shot in the arm to me because I was, I've been kind of existentially thinking about, this true crime field and why people deal with it and so forth. And this was a really good reminder that those of us who were fighting for these things and on the side of goodness, like really shouldn't give up the good fight, because the reality is that it's days like this that vindicate, that make it worth it, that because it shows that people who really think seriously about the psychology of these awful people, rather than just being somebody out in an armchair somewhere opining, really can bring closure, and look, the details of what really happened that day, aren't yet revealed. But the facts, as we understand them, are pretty ugly. And one of the questions that Chris and I had been processing for a while was, did this guy ever kill before? Did he kill again? Well, we now know that he did kill in, on the other side of the border before coming here and then fled. We know that, he was entirely capable of killing in that LA house, but he was booted out. We don't know who the intended victim was, if it even mattered to him, if they just had to be female, if it was just opportunistic. We don't know what his goal was. But we know, of course, about Rachel. That makes him a serial killer, because there are 2 murders separated in time by a cooling off period, we would assume, of at least a month, although we don't know the date of when the first killing happened. And then you have the fact that we don't really know if he committed any crimes after Rachel. I mean, I think that jury is out on that. Chris and I had talked privately many times about how odd it was that he suddenly vanished. We didn't know if he went back over the border. We didn't know what was going on. But my strong suspicion is he's going to be tied to other cases that right now look random, because this guy was all over. If you look at that bolo, Chris, do you see how many states he was in?
Yeah, he was in a bunch. And well, I have a theory on that as to why. And I think, Josh, can we play the press conference? Because there's a whole bunch of information that is revealed in this press conference. And one of the things that I think it's important for us to cover here is the neighborhood that this guy was in, and in South Central Los Angeles, in the 77th Division of LAPD, was a neighborhood that we said very early on, you just don't show up in this neighborhood. And in fact, the cops had even told the brothers, or the ex-husband and the brother, Michael, do not go to Los Angeles into that neighborhood by yourself. You need an escort. And there's a whole reason for that. And what we're going to learn, and what we said, and the moment I saw him come out of that house, I thought to myself, okay, this guy's got a familiarity with that neighborhood, because he's just not showing up. And, other people were like, doing this and, saying things that, they just kind of shoot from the hip. And I said, this guy is going to be from Central America. And I said it early on, and people can go back and they can listen to it. And
I remember that.
And I even mentioned he could be from El Salvador or Guatemala, or, anywhere down there. Right. And lo and behold, he's from El Salvador. Okay. And what's interesting about this, and I don't know if a lot of people have caught this yet, but I'm going to point it out here in the press conference. So, Josh, you got it teed up to where we can listen to the press conference?
As everyone's aware, on August 6, 2023, our peaceful Harford County community was rocked when the body of Rachel Morin was discovered in an area just about a mile from here, just off the Ma Pa hiking trail here just outside the town of Bel Air. In addition to the impact to our local Harford County community, Rachel's murder gained national and even international attention. The young mother of 5, whose life was violently taken in a public location, is one of the safest places in the state. It's not supposed to happen, and it shouldn't have happened. In the days and months since Rachel was murdered, Rachel's family and friends, our Harford County community, and the men and women of the Harford County Sheriff's Office, along with all of our allied partners, have worked tirelessly to bring the individual responsible for her death to justice. Our deputies and our partners have worked this case with persistence and passion for Rachel and for her family every day over the past 10 months. Just over 3 weeks ago, on May 20th, on what should have been Rachel's 38th birthday, and in a poetic coincidence, or perhaps in Rachel's own divine assistance, our investigators uncovered a lead that led us to this day. And on this day, I'm here to tell you Rachel's murderer is no longer a free man. Hopefully, he will never have the opportunity to walk free again.
What do you guys think about what was just said?
On her 38th birthday?
Yeah, that they discover a lead on her birthday.
I believe in divine intervention. For some reason, I just don't feel it was happenstance that's the way it happened. What about you, Doctor?
Well, I mean, it's consistent with the kind of thing that Chris and I were talking to the family members about, that when you're people of faith, you believe that there can be this kind of spiritual event, the spiritual intervention like that. And perhaps, those who aren't spiritual would interpret it as making meaning to make oneself feel better or something. But for those of us that are spiritual, you would interpret this as a very beautiful, symbolic mechanism by which, Rachel can let people know that, she's with them, waiting for them. And I know that when the news broke, a lot of true crime people, fans, or whatever you want to call them, followers, that were watching Chris talk about it on the interview room, their attitude about it was, they would say things like, God is good, this is beautiful, I'm happy for the family. All I know is that the next patch of time is going to be not so much a period of closure, but a very difficult time for the family, because now they're going to have to look at this guy, write impact statement. If he's guilty, they're going to have to go through a trial. If he's guilty, they're going to have to look at this guy in the face, think about what happened, hear details, see, it's really unimaginable, see what's presented in a courtroom, that kind of thing. And Chris, you know what I'm talking about, with the kind of things families are going to endure once a suspect is captured. And, Michael Stone and I always said that evil, the definition of evil, has a lot to do with the emotional reaction people have looking at the act. That evil has to do with that shock, that awe, looking at how unfathomable and disgusting and vile a premeditated act is. And Michael and I used to talk before he passed quite a lot about how one of the measures of evil is how impacted the family and the people around the victim are, because the horror just gets magnified, having to see your child like that. There are family members I've talked to who have had to go identify their battered child, for example, in a morgue, which is something I wouldn't wish on any human being. Chris, you've seen that, right? People,
yeah, it's horrible. But at the same time, it's necessary, unfortunately.
I know.
And in this case, they developed information that gave them a solid lead. And the irony here, to your point, Doc, is it was on her birthday. And we've often talked on this program about that divine intervention. And it's what's really neat to hear the sheriff say it, that she potentially was working from the other side. I mean, he subtly says it, but he does say it. And that's an interesting point. So
I thought it was very beautiful. And it tells you something about that his own heart was touched by it. Yep. I thought that was or maybe the family had talked to him about it, but Chris, I think the other thing is we need to pause and really talk about the outstanding law enforcement work on this case. I mean, I want to know what your theory is. I'm really curious about this. How do you think law enforcement patched it together that he had committed another murder? What's your theory about that? Because he's a serial killer, right? So that's a big deal. I mean, they patched it together. That was some really good work. Having to work with LA, having to work probably with Salvador.
he's going to give a little insight into that, and I'll tie that.
Yeah, I'd really
before I answer it, I'll tie it all together when we hear what he says, and a lot of people missed it, and so you're going to hear it first here on the witness box.
And allowed investigators to finally put a name to the image of the suspect in the video from Los Angeles, which we released 2 weeks after Rachel's death. After we had the video, we knew what he looked like. We knew what he looked like, but we didn't know who he was. With the new DNA evidence, now we know who he is, but we still didn't know where he was. As I have stated many times, this killer could have been laying his head in any community in the country or even in the world, and indeed, that was completely accurate. Over the past 2 weeks, investigators continued their diligent investigation and tracked our suspect all the way from Prince George's County to Tulsa, Oklahoma. Our investigators also obtained an arrest warrant yesterday afternoon, and as the arrest warrant was being issued, we met with Rachel's family, many of whom are with us today, to update them on the case and asked of them an almost impossible request, and that was to keep the information about the identity and the arrest warrant to themselves and protected, to allow investigators the opportunity to try to apprehend this suspect before it was made public in the news, so that our suspect did not have the opportunity to learn that he was wanted and to once again flee. 5 hours after meeting with the family, and just before midnight our time, police in Tulsa, Oklahoma, assisted by our federal partners, located and arrested Rachel's murderer, Victor Antonio Martinez-Hernandez. So far, we have learned that the suspect, now pictured on the screens, is a 23-year-old citizen of El Salvador who illegally crossed the border into the United States in February of 2023. We all suspected that perhaps Rachel was not his first victim. And it's my understanding that this suspect, this monster, fled to the United States illegally after committing the brutal murder of a young woman in El Salvador a month early in January of 2023.
Okay, so this goes right into what Dr. Mercado was saying, that the cooling off period, it looks like it was a month at a time. So I'm not going to be surprised, because he kills in El Salvador, comes up here, attacks the gal in L.A.,
right,
and then he kills Rachel. But we don't know post Rachel's homicide if we have any more victims around this country yet.
Right. And you see the randomness, Chris, how he has this almost, you could imagine this guy who has no sense of home, who's totally transient. Think of the symbolism of invading a home. I mean, of invading a country, actually. But it's that whole idea of, I have to take what I need because nobody cares about me. Right. So I just go in and take whatever I want. I invade a home in the middle of the night. And I think that what you have to picture is a guy who felt entitled in some hideous way, entitled because the world hadn't been too great to him, that kind of thing. That's what I think you're going to hear. There's a sympathy story about, nobody cared about me. I came from a, broken situation. I was in, I had to do what I had to do to get my needs met, whatever. And that's typical. You're going to hear that kind of story. But the reality is, Chris, that this guy had an appetite that indicates that he was a sexually motivated serial killer. And whatever sympathy story you're going to hear, the idea here is that this guy had an animal appetite for brutality and would get in the mood and just set up an ambush or break in or do whatever he wanted. It's very, I had said early on that he reminded me a lot of the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, where it was like anything goes, like there's no particular victimology. You're not necessarily stalking somebody. You're just opportunistic. You're taking what you want. You're transient. You're a bum, that kind of thing. And I think there's a little of that going on here. And I think this guy would have gone state to state to state to state, traveling by some mechanism that was possible without an ID. And I don't know, and that's why I thought he was taking buses. I don't know what you think, Chris, but he was either hitchhiking
I have a theory, but go
or a
ahead.
stolen car. But I want to know your theory on it. I really do. But he was getting around, and I had said on your show, Chris, on the interview room, I had said they should go to the bus station near the LA house. They should show the picture, look at the cameras, and they probably would have seen this guy got on there, after the crime and just got out of Dodge, because Chris, what it looks like is he comes over the border from El Salvador. Now, Lord knows how he did that, the trek to get over the border, how he got through, why he wasn't already on the radar for the murder the first time, I don't know. He gets over the border. It looks like he heads to, unless I'm very much mistaken, heads to LA, does what he does. From LA, travels all the way to Maryland, doing God knows what along the way, right? Does his thing in Maryland, and then is somehow in, according to the Bolo, he's even in Virginia at one point, right? Did I understand that correctly?
Correct.
He was in Virginia, and then next thing you know, he's in Oklahoma. So this guy is like, he also reminds me a little bit of Tommy Lynn Sells, who was a very prolific serial killer that they called the Coast to Coast Killer, because he just wandered around in a transient way after being booted out of his home and just did God knows what to everybody, until he was caught. Now, of course, this guy isn't as prolific as that. He's not as vicious, thank God, in terms of bordering on a kind of torture.
Tommy was
Sells about as bad as it gets. He's 22 in the New Evil. Bad as it gets. Incidentally, if you ever want to see, for educational reasons, how the mind of a horrible serial killer works, watch Michael Stone's interview on YouTube with Tommy Lynn Sells. And Tommy Lynn Sells, I'll never forget in that interview, Michael says to him, let me ask you something. If you hated these people, you were going to kill somebody's mother, break into a house, kill a woman, kill her. Why'd you have to kill the kids? Why'd you have to kill them? Well, because I know what it would feel like to be abandoned. I don't want them to grow up without their parents. Okay. So then Michael says to him, okay, well, then why didn't you just shoot them? Why'd you have to do things like throw them against the wall and kill them with bats and things like that? Why'd you have to do that? And Tommy Lynn Sells says, I hate guns. They're dangerous. I mean, talk about the logic of a serial killer, right? Or the time that they accused Tommy Lynn Sells of killing a 13-year-old behind some bushes in a park. He said it was the city's fault because they shouldn't have grown the hedges so high to tempt him to do it. So that's the logic of these people, and this guy, who knows how prolific he would have been. But I think you'd agree, Chris, there's no clear victimology. I don't think he was stalking Rachel. I really don't. I think he just wanted a female, and he set up an ambush like some kind of spider and pulled somebody into it. Because this guy, his appetite is all over the place. When he went into that house in L.A., I'm not sure he cared if it was the kid or the mother. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I don't know that, but that's what it looks like. He just had a ferocious hatred of women and an appetite. What do you think, Chris? You think he had a specific target?
No, I agree with you. I think it was random, completely.
Right? Yeah.
But I also think there's going to be some really interesting information we're going to talk about here. Before I reveal my thought process.
Yeah, but wait, don't forget to tell the audience your thoughts about how they connected him to El Salvador. Because you got everybody interested in that.
They had a Lexapol or an Interpol, what they call a red notice. And what a red notice is, it's a request. It's a worldwide law enforcement request to locate and potentially arrest a person, to hold them for extradition and surrender them. But it has to be an Interpol country. It is not an arrest warrant. It's basically a BOL, be on the lookout for international fugitives. And once they get them, they notify the country that, hey, we've got one of your red notice suspects here. But before that information is given out, it's put into a system that Interpol has, and it's typically for murder, rape, child abuse, robbery, that kind of stuff, all violent, serious violent crimes. And that's what happened here when they got the hit on his name. They ran his name through, NCIC, the National Crime Information Center. And from NCIC, that immediately triggered the Interpol, the red notice and Interpol, and it pops up basically said, whoa, hey, that name is familiar to an international community. And what happened, and you're going to hear it here in a minute, is once they got that hit, they sent the FBI, the field office down in El Salvador, probably over to his residence for his family, got a buccal swab from somebody, and quickly put it into a rapid DNA situation where they got a positive hit. And now, and I don't want to give away too much yet because I want you to hear it from the sheriffs and from everybody what they were saying.
By his anonymity, he brutally attacked a 9-year-old girl and her mother during a home invasion in March of 2023 in Los Angeles. And as everyone, I believe, is aware, that was our first DNA match linking Rachel's case to the Los Angeles case. It has been a fear of mine that once we identified this suspect, the result would be exactly this. And I want to now direct these comments to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue and to every member in both chambers of Congress.
He takes a shot at the politician.
We are 1,800 miles away here in Harford County. We are 1,800 miles away from the southern border, and the American citizens are not safe because of failed immigration policies. This is the second time in just 2 years that an innocent Harford County woman has lost her life to a criminal in our country illegally. Let me repeat that. 1,800 miles from the southern border, and this is the second woman in our county to be killed by an illegal alien. Suspects, in both cases, they are suspects from El Salvador with ties to criminal gangs.
So what's the with ties to criminal gangs? He didn't say he was a gang member,
Right.
but he has ties to criminal gangs. So what's the most famous gang out of El Salvador?
MS-13.
Correct. And so somebody in the circle here knew this guy, and they knew his family. So an investigator in El Salvador said, because that's typically how it happens, and this is why what I'm going to say here in a little bit, because he's getting to it, makes total sense of how they pin this guy down. So go ahead, Josh. Let's keep moving. And the president of El Salvador, by the way, is reforming that country. He's locked up just about 90% of all the MS-13 gangbangers in the world down there.
Yeah, and from what I understand, MS-13 is ranked the most brutal gang really in Central America and anywhere, really. I mean, they're known for their brutality.
Them and the Venezuelans. There's a very brutal sect of Venezuelan gangbangers who, by the way, they just caught 4 of them at the border recently. And they have these big, huge, almost like eagle type of tattoos on their chest. But yeah, the MS-13, man, those guys, they don't mess around. They don't mess around.
Victor Hernandez did not come here to make a better life for himself or for his family.
I was just going to say that as well. This isn't a guy that's looking for a fresh start and, has left his family behind because times have fallen hard on him. He's running, looking to commit crimes.
He came here to escape the crime he committed in El Salvador. He came here and murdered Rachel, and God willing, no one else. But that should have never been allowed to happen. Moving on, I want to make it clear.
What he just said there, God willing, no one else, they don't know yet at the time of this press conference is what he said there. So this investigation is still fluid and still moving.
It does not get solved, and we do not bring this criminal to justice without the amazing law enforcement teamwork from our local, state, and federal partners. And I mean that in all sincerity. Rachel's homicide does not get solved. There is no arrest without all of us working together. And for that, I want to thank everyone here in the front of the room and all those who aren't here, but I'm going to cover a list in a minute. I want to thank all of them for their assistance to our agency over the past 10 months. We are profoundly grateful for your dedication and support. The Federal Bureau of Investigation, especially the Baltimore Field Office, rendered invaluable assistance throughout the course of the investigation. Similarly, the State Police, Maryland State Police Crime Laboratory contributed greatly with their expertise and resources. I must also say thank you to the Los Angeles Police Department, the Department of Homeland Security, Naval Criminal Investigative Services, the Maryland State Police Bel Air Barrack, the U.S. Marshals Service Fugitive Task Force, the Harford County State's Attorney's Office, the Maryland Department of Natural Resources Police, the Bel Air Police Department, Maryland Coordination and Analysis Center, the Baltimore Washington HIDA.
Okay, so you had a whole list of people there, right?
Yes.
So what he mentioned was, what agency stuck out to you when you heard that?
The Federal Bureau of Investigation, especially the Baltimore Field Office, rendered invaluable assistance throughout the course of the investigation. Similarly, the State Police, Maryland State Police Crime Laboratory contributed greatly with their expertise and resources. I must also say thank you to the Los Angeles Police Department, the Department of Homeland Security, Naval Criminal Investigative Services, the Maryland State Police Bel Air Barrack, the U.S. Marshals Service Fugitive Task Force, the Harford County State's Attorney's Office, the Maryland Department of Natural Resources Police, the Bel Air Police Department, Maryland Coordination and Analysis Center, the Baltimore Washington HIDA.
Okay, so who's sticking out to you guys? What do you think?
It's the naval one stuck up to me.
Okay, NCIS is one. Yep, that's a good one. Naval Criminal Investigative Services, because, and I have a theory for that. Go ahead.
And the Natural Resources Police.
Gary?
Those are the two that jumped out at me. Am I missing something, Chris?
Yeah, HIDA.
Yes.
Okay, so there are 6 HIDA regions in the United States.
Well, wait, is that the thing that has to do with like drug muling?
High impact drug trafficking. You're right on my thought process. Okay. HIDA would not be involved in this. Okay. Unless, okay. Remember this guy, they're saying he has ties to gangs. Okay. Well, what are the cartels doing? What are the gangs doing? They're muling dope into the country, into the United States. And now, if we look at Region 2, it covers Arizona, Los Angeles, New Mexico, San Diego, South Texas, and West Texas. Region 3 covers Gulf Coast, Houston, Rocky Mountains, and Texoma, i.e., Oklahoma. What is the route from California right through Oklahoma City? The I-40 corridor. Is it possible? And if you follow that I-40 corridor and it punches all the way into the East Coast, okay, it goes into Raleigh, North Carolina, and then it drops down into Wilmington. But if you were to go north, you will drop right into Maryland on the 95. The 40 hits the 95. That I-40 corridor is a HIDA corridor. They have task forces all the way through east to west on the United States, covering that corridor for drug smuggling. And that was, to me, when I heard that, and I thought to myself, man, is this guy moving dope? And this is why he's all over the country? I'm going to submit to you, we're going to hear a lot more about that, because the sheriff is also going to say something. He mentioned the U.S. Marshals, FTS, the Fugitive Task Force. Okay. And he said, I want to thank the U.S. Marshals, Fugitive Task Force. Well, they have these task force all over the country that hunt these guys down. And they also have one up in Tulsa because of the drug problems. And this guy is found hanging out, allegedly, by a bar or something to that effect. And he got contacted for a trespassing problem. And they probably hooked him up. He didn't have any ID, obviously. He's he's not from a U.S. citizen. He's a non-citizen migrant, as they call him. Okay. And lo and behold, he's got no ID, so they're going to ID him. And boom, they get the hit. They get the NCIC hit that says, whoa, hey, this guy, we got a problem here, River City. And they hook him up. And lo and behold, it's their guy after they positively ID'd him. Probably by this time they had his fingerprints, they had his biometrics information from El Salvador. His, because they do biometrics when somebody is, problematic in another country, and they can match it. It's called iDetect, and it's as accurate as a fingerprint. But anyway, so that's my theory on that piece of the puzzle, and we're going to hear a little bit more here, Josh.
Department, El Salvadorian authorities, and the many law enforcement agencies, both state and local, who provided invaluable assistance to the Harford County Sheriff's Office during this investigation. As I think is evident, this was truly a comprehensive law enforcement effort, and I am exceptionally proud of the work done by the collective team and countless others who made last night's arrest in Tulsa possible. I also want to thank the members of our Harford County community for their patience, support, and cooperation throughout this investigation, to include hundreds upon hundreds of tips that our investigators have received. Today, we were able to provide what some like to refer to as closure to Rachel's family and for our Harford County community. I want to thank the members of the Morin family, and you're going to hear from, as Christy said, from Patricia here in a minute, but no questions. They have been by the side of our detectives this entire time, doing anything that they could do to help the investigation and to help our detectives, to help bring this individual that took Rachel's life to justice. I recognize there is nothing that will ever close the door or bring true closure concerning the loss of Rachel, but it is my hope and the hope of all involved working this case that the arrest of this suspect brings her family and our Harford County community some peace. I would like to now ask FBI Baltimore Field Office Special Agent in Charge, William Debano, did I get it right? Debano, to offer a few remarks.
Thank you, Sheriff Gaylor. Good afternoon. My name is Bill Delbano. I'm the Special Agent in Charge of the FBI Baltimore Field Office. Today, our focus remains on Rachel.
He's what they
Bringing
call the
justice
SAC,
for her,
SAIC, Special Agent in Charge.
finding answers for her family and loved ones, and making sure the violent criminal who so viciously took her life cannot harm anyone else. The FBI is proud to stand united with our partners in the Harford County Sheriff's Office as we announce this arrest. We know nothing can take away the pain and the anguish Rachel's family and friends have endured. Please know, on behalf of the FBI, our hearts are with you. To the public, keeping our community safe is one of the FBI's highest priorities, and so are the invaluable partnerships required to accomplish it. During the investigation, here's what I can share from the FBI. Our investigative genetic genealogy team in Baltimore worked countless hours to identify the suspect by using crime scene DNA and tracing that DNA to potential family members. Investigators even traveled to El Salvador as part of their efforts to identify this killer. To find the suspect, we've provided technical assistance, helping to pinpoint his location.
Okay, stop.
That brings us to last night.
So we know they used IgG, investigative genetic genealogy. But here's the key. what did he just say? Technical assistance to pinpoint his location. That means they had the capability of following that phone. Okay? And that's how they got to him within 5 hours of notifying the family. They pinned him down.
They knew right where it was.
That's why, remember, he said, I want to thank the Maryland Fusion Center, or, the, hang on for a minute. I want to look for the acronym again. I forget what it's called. Let's see here. About MAC. Let's see here. Yeah, the Maryland Coordinator and Analysis Center. Remember, he mentioned that. I want to thank our partners. Those are the big boys that said he's at a bar in Tulsa,
and they knew where to go.
So play that back for a minute.
During the investigation, here's what I can share from the FBI. Our investigative genetic genealogy team in Baltimore worked countless hours to identify the suspect by using crime scene DNA and tracing that DNA to potential family members. Investigators even traveled to El Salvador as part of their efforts to identify this killer. To find the suspect, we provided technical assistance, helping to pinpoint his location. And that brings us to last night.
Okay,
Where
stop.
Tulsa police.
What did you just hear?
That they helped with technical assistance to pinpoint his location.
Right. And now he's going to talk about Tulsa. So
that's crazy.
And FBI agents were able to successfully apprehend and arrest the suspect in Oklahoma.
So go back.
Harford County.
And we'll let it play through for a second.
Here's what I can share from the FBI. Our investigative genetic genealogy team in Baltimore worked countless hours to identify the suspect by using crime scene DNA and tracing that DNA to potential family members. Investigators even traveled to El Salvador as part of their efforts to identify this killer. To find the suspect, we provided technical assistance, helping to pinpoint his location. And that brings us to last night, where Tulsa police and FBI agents were able to successfully apprehend and arrest the suspect in Oklahoma. Harford County and the investigators on this case worked every angle, tirelessly and constantly, never giving up and following every lead and piece of evidence. We thank Harford County for their partnership and bringing us into the investigation. As Sheriff Gaylord outlined, we thank everyone who helped make this arrest possible. To all those who have been waiting for an arrest to be made, for answers, we hope this brings a sense of justice and some peace. The FBI vows to continue to work every day to keep our community safe and prioritize the partnerships so vital.
This is really important for the public to understand. This is a sheriff's agency. They did not have to bring, quote, the FBI into this. They made a choice to bring the FBI into this, and this SAC here just thanked them for, quote, bringing the FBI into this. But look at the resources the FBI has when they can, A, help with identifying the suspect by sending agents to El Salvador or activating the agents in El Salvador.
I thought about that. What an extreme thing. I mean, you leaving the country to go investigate. That's a big deal.
Yeah. Actually, they have a field office down there, but yeah, but you're right. Absolutely. And then the technical assistance to, quote, pinpoint where he was. And then they notified Tulsa and the FBI field office, and in unison, they made the arrest of the suspect. Tulsa took him into custody, but the FBI had some tools, I can guarantee you, that said, yeah, he's around the corner. Okay. And so that's how they did. That's how they pulled this guy in. Okay? That's how they got him. And what's fascinating about this it's important then sometimes for these elected officials, because a sheriff is an elected official. He's not, he or she is not, appointed by a city council or a board of supervisors. They are elected by the citizens of that area. And it's important that they not have their pride in the way and that they allow everybody to play in the hunt and get these guys. And because that's how cases go cold. Because they don't want to let information out. They hold it. All right. So behind the scenes, what was going on was a lot of information was being shared, and it was being shared through MCAC, Maryland Coordinated and Analysis Center, and MCAC was pushing it out into the environment, and that's how they got hold of the red notice, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what's the result? You have a brutal potential, total serial killer in custody, and thank goodness. And we don't even know what the totality of his crimes are here yet.
But we do know, Chris, a little bit about what would have motivated this guy based on.
We understand his motivation. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So that tells you that this guy wouldn't have stopped.
No. And I think you nailed that from day one, Gary. I mean, just your assessment once again. We keep talking to people out there and saying, so far we're batting 1,000. We're batting 1,000, and
we've been around the block a couple times, Chris.
A couple of weekends.
Hey, Chris, is this your first rodeo?
No, this isn't my first rodeo.
A couple of weekends we've been here, but it was really cool. Okay, to see this one come together, and there are going to be others that will fall into place. We've these missing kids. I'm just praying that agencies are swallowing their pride and allowing all the resources into the problem, just like these guys. If not, that's why the Cold Case Foundation exists, because they run out of resources, and they hold it so close to the vest that they don't realize putting some information out there actually frees up a lot more information. And so
turn it over to Evan Campanella, the Deputy Special Agent in Charge, HSI, Baltimore.
Homeland Security.
Thank you, Sec Del Bagno. First off, I would like to thank Sheriff Gaylor for having HSI present for today's announcement. Today's announcement is the culmination of almost 1 year of investigative activity that might not always go noticed by the public. This investigation highlights the cooperation and the collaboration HSI has with its state and local and federal partners. And I'm happy to be here today with Sheriff Gaylor and our partners to announce the arrest of Mr. Martinez-Hernandez. I hope that today's announcement, as the sheriff pointed out, will help bring some closure to Rachel's family. And again, I would like to thank Sheriff Gaylor for asking HSI to participate in this investigation and to be here for today's announcement. I would now like to invite Harford County State's Attorney, Allison Healy, to the podium for her remarks.
So why was HSI important, you guys think?
The Homeland Security?
Yeah. Why are they important?
Because because he was an illegal immigrant.
Yeah. And they've got an ICE hold on him.
Oh, okay.
So now that
send him back.
No, they won't send him back. They're going to prosecute him here. But the reason, remember, this is we used to call this show and tell. Okay, for these kind of press conferences. Okay, it's yes to say everything that we've done. Here we are, and then of course you give the DA a platform, and they're going to she's going to say we're going to hammer this guy. I'm sure of it. But anyway, the HSI is important because it gives them a chance to say, you notice he didn't say anything about what they did. He just says, I want to thank the sheriff for allowing us to be here. Okay. That's basically a political move versus anything else. All they did was walk into the jail. They had a Homeland Security guy walk into the jail, hand them a form that says, hey, we have an ICE hold on this guy.
Yeah.
Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Don't let him out. Don't let him slip through the cracks. Get his shoe size. Because now they're going to go through an extradition. They got to get him back to Maryland. And the U.S. Marshals are going to play a role in that. And that's why they're thanking the Marshals. Okay. Because the Marshals are going to transport him because he's a high-risk flight, target. And so that's going to be why they're there.
Afternoon. I want to commend the Harford County Sheriff's Office and other assisting agencies on the hard work, expertise, and diligence identifying and apprehending the suspect in the murder of Rachel Morin. They worked tirelessly on this lengthy and difficult investigation for the public safety of our community and bringing Rachel's family peace, knowing that the next step is prosecution. I will personally be leading the prosecution of this case. While the defendant is innocent until and unless he is proven guilty, Harford County and our neighboring communities can rest assured that my office will take all steps necessary to ensure that justice is served for Rachel Morin and her family.
I always like this thought as well, Chris. The police have done their job. They're 100% convinced that this is their guy. It has to go, he has to have a trial if that's what the route that they go. But I mean, you're sitting here listening. These people have no doubt that this is who they were looking for. They feel comfortable telling people we got him. And that, and I know that there's another side of the law that they have to go through. But I mean, this is their pay dirt, not the trial itself. They're like, we got this guy off the street. We did our job.
It's a very good, solid point. Is law enforcement are hunters, okay? And they have to put the puzzle together to say, okay, this is the lion. This is the lion. We got the lion. How do we know? Well, because we've tested it, and we've verified it. We've talked to all of the other lions around that says, yeah, that's your lion. And we took his blood, and we got a lion match, and et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So from there, in their minds, it's called probable cause. Okay. He's not guilty until proven innocent at that point, until they put a set of handcuffs on him. Right. Up until that point, they felt, yeah, that's our guy. Okay, we got him. Now, what's interesting about this, now that it has shifted, to your point, to the legal system, okay, now the words of innocent until proven guilty start appearing. And this is where now social media will take over and go, well, hey, but what if it's not that guy? DNA is always, in left field or right field or, genetic DNA, just like Koberger. All of a sudden the fan clubs, start showing up. Okay. Well, there weren't any fan clubs, okay, around Rachel that day. Imagine the horror in her heart, in her mind, in her aura, being drug off of that trail brutally, her life being taken and essayed, and the guy walking out as if nothing happened. And then all of a sudden, this guy gets to come into the courtroom with a suit on, and everybody goes, oh, look at him. I just have so much, oh man, I can relate to that guy. Okay. I can blah, 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 blah. Okay. That's fine. Great and dandy. Okay. Tell that to Heuermann's victims who have all been cut up, to their families. Share that with them.
Yeah.
Tell them how much, you support, this other person or that person or this person, that person, whatever. Okay. And so there is you can feel it sometimes in the room when I used to walk in, because you go to major crimes at the DA's offices and you drop your case file on them. And now all of a sudden the work starts, because now the defense gets it and they're already of the opinion that the cops did something wrong. There's got to be something in here. So let's get their personnel files. It's called Brady discovery. Let's get out there and get their personnel files. The cops did it. They did something. Okay. And, then they come up with themes. Okay. What's our theme for the defense? Okay. Well, we've got to create empathy for this person. Okay. And that's what they do. That's what their job is. Okay. And so everybody has a job here. So you got multiple jobs here that are on display in this press conference.
Chris, you think they're going to charge him in California too?
They may just hold it till after the trial of Rachel.
But it was pretty serious. The home invasion, some kind of attempt of I don't know what. It's not a joke. I mean,
Yeah, but
that's in itself.
Yeah, I mean they won't charge him at the same time. They'll let the Maryland thing take its place, and then if there's still time in the statute of limitations, then they'll charge him in California. But the governor over there will let him out, so it's probably not a good idea to keep him in California.
Do you think that the fact that he do you think the fact that he went to LA gives a clue? I think the fact that he went to LA. Let's redo that. Chris, do you think the fact that he went to Los Angeles gives a clue about the route by which he came into the U.S.?
Yeah, he came in through probably the southern border.
Where exactly? I mean, do you think he came in through Tijuana or something?
Well, through Baja, not through TJ.
How do what makes you think that? I mean, this is your neck of the woods out there. So what makes you think?
Well, because that's a trafficking route. Yeah. And that would put him right up into LA. I mean, he comes right up on the Interstate 5 and they shoot him right up into South Central. In fact, you pass the neighborhood that he was in, and they have these crash houses. These cartels, they work through, crash houses. So that means the dope comes in, and then the mules, they run it up to the locations, and then they either dump it or put it, where it needs to go. But they drop it off, and they hand them a wad of money, and they go off into the next venture, and or they give them another, maybe processed dope. If it's fentanyl or something like that, they pack it up into a vehicle, and then they hit the I-40 or the I-10, the southern route, but the 40 goes right through Oklahoma, goes right through Oklahoma City, and Tulsa's just outside of Oklahoma City. Okay? And he could hit that whole corridor, and with dope in his car, and you can go all the way to the East Coast, and you end up in North Carolina and just, take a left on the 65, on the 95, and you're up into Maryland, up into the DC area.
Well, let me ask you something. Based on, what happened in LA, easily getting booted out by what sounds like a pretty young family member, the chaos of it, leaving the hat, the going out shirtless, the whole thing. You think this guy was intoxicated or high when he committed the assault or the attempted assault in LA? Is it possible that he's one of these sexually motivated offenders that kind of uses drugs or alcohol as a kind of come on before, to excite themselves before they commit an offense? I mean,
Yeah.
think about that. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, we know alcohol was involved in LA, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think your assessment of that, Gary, and I agree with you, is very interesting, because remember they found an alcohol bottle, a liquor bottle in the residence in LA.
It might build up this guy's confidence. It might, because we know about these offenders that, they get into this kind of tailspin of being stressed out about something. There are life events that kind of have them worked up, and they start enacting these long-standing feelings and fantasies, and then it's like a drug addiction where they have to keep going above and above and above the last thing to keep it, kind of arousing, to get that dopamine pumping, and you have to picture a guy that's on the run. He's nervous, he's over the border, he doesn't know if he's safe or has everybody on his tail. He's committed what sounds like a pretty horrendous crime, and then now he escalates to home invasion, right? I mean, that's a pretty serious escalation, Chris. I mean, think about it. Yeah,
but we don't know how many murders he's done in El Salvador or burglaries and all that stuff. I mean, the guy he just walks out of that place with a big smile on his face, when we see him walking out. So yeah, I agree with you. I mean, if this guy could have 20, 30, 40 of these crimes, initial crimes in El Salvador before he even murdered, or he's got multiples down there. We know of one for sure where they've nailed him. Okay. But yeah, to your point, he's got the confidence already built up to where he's able to go into the house and just walk out like, okay,
Right. But this is the thing, Chris, and this is a point I've heard you make on the interview room that I think got a little underappreciated, which is that knowing what we know about these offenders, the disappointment, the psychological effect of a failed attempt in LA would fuel a more ferocious overcompensation with another offense, because the whole point is he's got to prove, that he's the king of the hill, kind of a thing. So you imagine that he went about prowling and looking to do something that would really express his power, his manhood, his virility, whatever. And and I think poor Rachel bore the brunt of this guy's feelings of smallness and etc. And Chris, what I think is interesting about people who go in and attack in the dark and at night when people are sleeping, or clock someone over the head and attack them from the back or whatever, is that if they tried to confront somebody who actually had a chance, who was awake, who was facing them, they would see that he was probably just a little nothing, so it tells you something about this guy, right? You got to do it when they're asleep. You got to sneak in when they're vulnerable. You got to come behind them, because if they saw him, what was he? Right?
He's a weasel.
Nothing, right? And that's the whole thing. Is that the whole thing is a huge overcompensation, and that's why I think the tragedy of it is that, if this guy got, like, things didn't work out in one offense, chances are someone else had to bear the brunt, because he had to compensate for it. And the other thing is his appetite. Why do we believe it suddenly vanished for almost a year? It's very hard to believe. I think what it is that we're used to these offenders having a clear MO, signature elements, whatever. This is a different type of guy. If this guy's guilty, this is the kind of guy that went around like a lion, just devouring,
Yeah, he's an absolute predator monster.
And isn't it interesting that the conversation has already started if this guy is guilty?
Well, I have to say so, Chris.
No, I'm just saying, but that's the shift.
Phase two
that we were just talking about a minute ago. Now that this guy's in custody, everybody's going to start talking about, well, what if it isn't him?
The case is pretty strong, Chris, based on what I'm hearing. I'm only saying that I think, because we want to be, this is the United States, people do have a right to due process. I think it is right to say, innocent until proven guilty.
I totally agree with you. I'm not
But
just
yeah, I
talking.
know what you mean. It's a pretty solid case. I mean, they've
Yeah,
got
I mean, cops
cops
are out there and these guys are shooting at them. And they don't get to say, "Oh, well, this guy's not guilty." That they're trying to kill him. They're trying to kill cops. And then when you get him in custody and you put handcuffs on him, everybody that shows up goes, "Well, if he's not guilty, okay. Oh, well, wait a minute. The guy just shot at me with an AK-47. He's guilty. Trust me, he's guilty." Okay, that's the mentality that's different in law enforcement than it is in the court system.
Right, they got their guy. Yeah.
Well, I think the reason that people out here, particularly experts, have to be sensitive about the language about this is you don't want to taint a jury pool. That's the thing. At the end of the day, the people that are going to be trying him are going to need a jury pool that is even open to the possibility that there's a chance this guy isn't guilty, that kind of thing. And so I think it's fair. You would agree, Chris, it's the right thing.
I agree, but Florida's got it right. They just released 896 pages of everything they did in their investigation. And I mentioned this on my show the other night. What's Florida going to do? They're going to get all the people that couldn't figure out how to get out of jury duty into the courtroom. Okay.
But you're talking about the Soto case?
Yeah. And they're going to sit down. And the first question they're going to ask is, have you heard of this A, B, C, and D? Have you read any of this E, F, and G? Anything like this? And the one that says, I don't know anything about this, you're a juror. Number 4.
How'd you like to be the defense attorney on that case?
No, thank you.
I mean, there's film footage of acts. Chris, you know what he did.
Of him moving the body.
But I'm saying this film footage he took of what he did.
To me, Dr. Gary, as you say, would you like to be? I think that whoever this defense attorney's job is just going to try to keep him from getting the death.
Well, Chris, it is a death penalty case, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. But
not Maryland. They don't have the death penalty.
It may be, yeah.
But they don't have the death penalty in Maryland.
Attorney's job is going to strictly be to keep him from seeing death row.
Right.
Well, right.
And
Well,
the prosecution's job is to get out the marshmallows, the sticks, plug them in, and when they light the chair up, stand over it. And
I did listen to the
make some s'mores.
Oh, God. And we can say if he's guilty, if he's guilty. Oh, I'll say it. I'm no expert. I'm no nothing. He guilty.
We're entitled to these opinions, but I tell you, the Soto case, Chris. Seriously, is that jury going to have to see?
Oh yeah,
the footage of the abuse.
Absolutely, everything. It can taint their and ruin their lives forever.
What I understand is unbearable.
I'll never forget. Even Kurt Owens, he was the defense attorney for Brandon Wilson. At the end of the trial, Kurt came out for the press conference, and he's a good friend. He was just changed. His whole life was changed because he had to witness, and put on all of the information about, what this guy had done, and he had all the crime scene photos. And
oh God, I bet you have them, Chris, don't you?
Oh, I have them, yeah, but more importantly, I have them ingrained in my brain. Because I stood there and I watched everything, and I had to figure out, through blood spatter analysis and all this other stuff, we had to figure out what was going on in that bathroom. And that's another program as a whole. But this is where I think the mentality of, law enforcement, sometimes the public doesn't give them, and they do, but sometimes they don't get the credit to say, okay, we just captured this monster. Okay, this Tyrannosaurus Rex. It took us forever to get this thing in the cage. And now that it's in the cage, everybody shows up with a key that says, well, he could be innocent. So this Tyrannosaurus Rex, let's go ahead and put the key in and open the door and let him out. That's the system in the United States. And they make movies about that, right? Right? They make movies about the raptors and, all the other dinosaurs that come out and attack, the island. Okay. And, The cops are going, keep that doggone thing in the cage, would you, Frank? Yeah, I know, but let's at least pretend it's innocent and it hasn't eaten any children yet.
One of my favorite lines from Jurassic Park 2 is when Jeff Goldblum's character, the scientist guy, right? He says, are you ready to go on? Because they're going to go hunt for T-Rexes and stuff. And he said, are you ready to go on this wild goose chase? And he says, see, this is the only time where the geese actually chase you.
Right.
Yeah, good point. Good point. The giant birds out of the sky.
Thank you for listening to the Witness Box, the Thinking Persons podcast. We appreciate you listening. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review and rate us. You can also become a member with a monthly contribution. It helps us keep making content more often. We appreciate it more than you know. Thank you so much. Take care.